Frank Sinatra, the golden voice of the 20th century, wasn't just a musical icon. He was a man cloaked in charisma, controversy, and whispered allegiances. Behind the tuxedos and spotlights stood a figure entwined with power, loyalty, and fear. His name was respected in Hollywood, but feared in other rooms. This is the story of Frank Sinatra's hidden underworld, one where his mafia ties weren't just rumors. They were worse than anyone reported. Early life and family influences. Frank Sinatra wasn't born into fame. He was born into smoke-filled bars, backroom deals, and the intoxicating mix of power and poverty. In Hoboken, New Jersey, in 1915, Sinatra grew up in an environment as tough as the men who ran it. His father, a boxer and tavern owner, and his mother, a politically savvy midwife known for illegal abortions, were no strangers to walking the legal tightrope. During Prohibition, the family's tavern served more than food and drink. It served bootleg liquor and backroom favors. Young Frank saw everything: the drunks, the debt collectors, the men with envelopes and whispers. It wasn't just the streets that shaped Sinatra. It was bloodline. His maternal grandfather hailed from near Corleone, Sicily, where the roots of the Mafia ran deep. The stories passed through generations weren't just tales. They were templates. Frankie's uncles ran illicit liquor across county lines, while his mother had local political bosses on speed dial. His home was a revolving door of precinct captains, fixers, and friends who called in favors. Respect wasn't asked for. It was negotiated. By his teens, Sinatra had one foot in two worlds: music and muscle. He sang for change in smoky clubs, but it wasn't just the crowd that clapped. It was the wise guys, the ones who sat in the back, counting chips and settling scores. These weren't casual acquaintances. They were men who noticed talent and kept tabs on loyalty. One man stood above them all: Willie Moretti. Moretti wasn't just a gangster. He was family, Frank's unofficial godfather. Moretti took the young crooner under his wing, helping him secure early gigs and ensuring no one interfered with his trajectory. In return, Frank offered the one thing these men valued more than money: allegiance. Moretti had connections to one of the most feared bosses in New York, Frank Costello. And from there, Sinatra's world expanded far beyond Hoboken's borders. But Frank wasn't a puppet. He had fire in him. He dropped out of high school, joined a street gang for a time, and was arrested at 23 for seduction, a polite legal term for a very impolite scandal. The charges were dropped, but the mugshot endured. In it, you don't see a boy. You see a man unbothered by consequence, staring back at the world with defiance. That photo would become the face of a legend in the making. Still, he wasn't blind to what he was becoming. He once said, "If St. Francis of Assisi had worked saloons, he'd have met the same guys I did." Sinatra wasn't claiming innocence. He was claiming inevitability. You didn't rise from Hoboken without learning the rules. You played the game, or the game played you. His mother wanted him to be respected. Wamina respetari, as they say in the old country. And respect in Sinatra's world didn't come from soft hands. It came from grit, loyalty, and understanding how the system worked. Music was the dream, but the streets taught him survival. And it was this unique blend, raw talent and ruthless awareness, that would propel him to unimaginable heights. But nothing in Frank's rise would be as clean as his tuxedo. Every step forward carried shadows. Every stage he sang on had backstories the public would never know. Until now. Rise to fame in music and film. Frank Sinatra's rise in music didn't happen by accident. It was as calculated as a mob deal, as perfectly timed as a musical crescendo. In 1939, he landed his first big break singing for Harry James, but it wasn't long before he jumped ship to join the bigger name, Tommy Dorsey, the swing band titan of the era. That decision would change Sinatra's life and nearly cost him his soul. Dorsey demanded more than talent. He demanded ownership. Sinatra's contract gave Dorsey over 40% of his lifetime earnings. It was a chokehold clause, and Frank felt it from day one. But at the time, he needed Dorsey more than Dorsey needed him. On stage, Sinatra captivated audiences with a voice so smooth it melted rooms. Women screamed, men listened, but behind the curtain he stewed. He wanted out. He tried to buy his freedom, offering money, begging for compromise, but Dorsey wouldn't budge. And then the impossible happened. Sinatra walked away, free of the contract. How? The story passed down through insiders is pure folklore, but it has legs. One night, Tommy Dorsey received a visit. At his hotel, a few men dropped by, Willie Moretti among them. Calm, cordial, but carrying a message. A message with weight. Dorsey later joked, perhaps not joking at all, that a gun was placed gently against his lips, and he was told it would be wise to release Frank. For $1. He did. Sinatra denied the story all his life. But Dorsey's change of heart was so sudden, so complete, it raised more than eyebrows. It raised alarms. And it formed the spine of one of fiction's most famous scenes. The Godfather's Johnny Fontane begging Don Corleone to get him out of a contract, a frightened band leader, a favor, and in the movie, a horse's head in a bed. It was art imitating life, or life imitating power. With his freedom won, however it came, Sinatra went solo. The timing was perfect. America was on the edge of war, and Frank's voice became its emotional soundtrack. From 1943 to 1945, Sinatra mania hit like a bomb. Teen girls fainted at his concerts. Crowds lined up for hours. He wasn't just a singer, he was a phenomenon, and Hollywood took notice. Frank made the leap to film, starring in musicals and light comedies. He played charming sailors and dreamy lovers. But as fast as his star rose, it flickered. By the late 40s, the mood was shifting. New crooners, changing tastes, and whispers, always whispers, about his personal life began to chip away at his image. Then came the brawl. In 1947, Sinatra punched gossip columnist Lee Mortimer in the face at a nightclub. Mortimer had written about Frank's supposed mob ties. Frank claimed the columnist had insulted him, but the public saw a man with a temper. Dangerous, volatile. The assault wasn't just a scandal. It was a glimpse behind the curtain. Sinatra wasn't just the cool guy with the microphone. He had rage. He had connections. And he wasn't afraid to throw a punch for respect. By 1951, things got worse. His marriage to Nancy Barbato was collapsing under the weight of fame and affairs. His romance with Ava Gardner was explosive, passionate, public, and destructive. Studios cooled on him. Radio sponsors backed away. He was losing his grip. And then came the comeback. The movie was From Here to Eternity, a gritty war drama with real stakes. Sinatra wanted in, desperately. But studio head Harry Cohn wasn't interested. Frank's reputation was damaged goods. Until suddenly Cohn changed his mind. The story that circulated was that Johnny Roselli, a smooth-talking mob fixer, made a call. A simple call, and the door opened. Frank got the part. He played Angelo Maggio, a hot-headed soldier with a fragile heart. It wasn't just acting, it was redemption. The performance won him an Oscar. The career drought ended overnight. And the legend? It was reborn. After that, Sinatra wasn't just a singer or actor. He was a survivor. A man who had seen the abyss and pulled himself back, with or without help from dangerous friends. By the mid-1950s, he signed with Capitol Records and became the voice of Las Vegas. His swagger returned. His confidence swelled. The bow tie, the fedora, the whiskey glass, they weren't props. They were armor. But for all his class, he never left behind the ones who helped him rise. Behind the glamour, Sinatra still took late-night calls from wise guys, still attended private dinners where laughter and loyalty mixed with silence and secrets. Sinatra's fame was now bulletproof, but so was the rumor that it had been paid for, not in dollars, but in favors, threats, and whispers behind closed doors. Mafia connections, deepening through the 1940s and 50s. Frank Sinatra was no longer just a performer, he was becoming something else, a symbol, a brand, and to the underworld, an asset. As his career soared, so too did his value to men who didn't pay in cash, but in favors, protection, and silence. By the mid-1940s, Frank wasn't just brushing shoulders with mobsters, he was dining with them, traveling with them, laughing with them in back rooms away from the spotlight. There was Joe Fischetti, a childhood friend from Hoboken, who just so happened to be a courier for Al Capone's outfit. Then came Charles "Lucky" Luciano, recently deported but still a shadow force in global organized crime. Through Fischetti, Frank met Luciano, first in Florida, later in Cuba. That meeting wouldn't be forgotten. It happened in 1946 at the Hotel Nacional in Havana, under the guise of a tribute performance. What it really was the Havana Conference, a secret summit of Mafia heavyweights from New York, Chicago, Florida, and Sicily, Bugsy Siegel, Vito Genovese, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, all under one roof, protected by the Cuban government and fueled by American corruption. Sinatra was there, on stage, yes, but not just for entertainment. He delivered more than music. According to rumors, never confirmed, but never denied, he hand-delivered a suitcase. Inside, $2 to $3 million in cash. His job? Bring the money from stateside investors to Luciano to help seed Mafia-controlled operations in Cuba, casinos, drug routes, and government bribes. And the rumors didn't stop there. One customs agent at Miami Airport allegedly flagged the bag. But when he saw the signature smile of Old Blue Eyes, he waved it through. No search, no questions. That was the Sinatra effect, charm as a weapon. In return, Sinatra's sins stayed hidden. While tabloids raged over minor scandals, the real dirt, his explosive moods, his violence toward women, his crippling insecurities, stayed off the record. Luciano made sure of it. Sinatra had delivered, and now the favor was returned. As Vegas began to sprout from the sand, the Mafia had their golden goose. Bugsy Siegel, bankrolled by New York bosses, opened the Flamingo Hotel. He wanted stars. He needed shine. He got Sinatra. Frank became the city's face. He didn't just perform, he helped legitimize the desert empire. The Sands Hotel became his kingdom. He didn't own it entirely, but he controlled the room. High rollers followed him. Movie stars came just to sit near him. And when someone owed, Frank would gently mention a friend who could help fix things. But Las Vegas wasn't only about music. It was about money laundering, drug smuggling, and political influence. Men like Mickey Cohen, the LA mob boss, had his hands in the entertainment world. So did Johnny Rosselli, the fixer who handled both Mafia business and Hollywood unions. Sinatra hosted parties where singers, senators, and soldiers of the underworld sipped from the same bottle. In one such night in Palm Springs, it's said Sam Giancana, the Chicago kingpin, toasted to Sinatra's voice, calling it the soundtrack of our business. Whether the quote is real or not no longer matters. It feels true, and truth was never quite clear when it came to Sinatra. He denied mob ties his whole life, but the FBI compiled over 1,200 pages of files on him. Surveillance logs, phone taps, suspicious friendships. They followed his visits to Giancana's Chicago, tracked his plane to Havana, logged his stays in mob-controlled hotels. Even when Sinatra wasn't pulling the trigger, he was the man they called when they needed class. He was the front, the bridge between crime and culture. When someone got whacked, Frank sent flowers. When someone needed an alibi, he provided the guest list. And there were whispers, persistent, chilling, that a famous producer who refused to cast Frank in a war film had his car torched, that an executive who insulted him in front of Ava Gardner found his dog dead on his lawn, that a hotel owner who tried to cut Frank's residency short suddenly changed his mind after a visit. None of these were proven, but proof wasn't needed. It was the myth that mattered. Sinatra had become a man no one wanted to cross, not because he was a killer, but because he knew killers who owed him. Even as his public image shone in magazines and movies, Frank Sinatra's real power wasn't on stage. It was in the shadows, in the phone calls that never got logged, in the dinners where no photographs were taken, in the debts paid in favors, not in dollars. By the end of the 1950s, Frank wasn't just a star, he was a kingmaker. And every king, no matter how regal his robe, has blood on his hands, whether he draws it himself or not. Political entanglements and Kennedy. By the end of the 1950s, Frank Sinatra's world had expanded far beyond music and mobsters. Now he wanted power, real power, and in America, that meant politics. The lines between crooners and kingmakers were already blurred, but Sinatra was about to ink his name across the highest corridors of government, dragging the underworld with him. It began innocently enough. Sinatra, ever the patriot and public persona, aligned himself with the Democratic Party, lending his charisma to benefit concerts and campaign rallies. But his political interest sharpened in 1959, when a young senator from Massachusetts caught his attention, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Handsome, Catholic, charismatic. Sinatra saw in JFK not just a future president, but a mirror. Both came from working-class immigrant roots. Both loved women, charm, and secrecy. The Sinatra-Kennedy alliance became more than endorsement. It was a partnership. Sinatra hosted fundraising galas, rallied Hollywood stars, and called in every favor he'd earned from coast to coast. But most significantly, he reached out to the mob. Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father, knew politics wasn't won by charm alone. Votes needed to be delivered. In West Virginia, where Kennedy's Catholicism was a liability, the Chicago outfit had connections in mining unions. Sam Giancana, who had become the de facto boss of the Chicago mob, was approached. Here's where it gets murky. Intentionally murky. Some say Frank made the call. Others say it was Joe Kennedy. Some claim both. But what's widely believed is that Sinatra acted as the middleman, bridging the future president of the United States to America's most dangerous men. Giancana pulled strings. Voter turnout surged in key precincts. Kennedy won West Virginia. Then he won the nomination. Then the presidency. Sinatra celebrated like he'd won it himself. He renovated his Palm Springs estate for a presidential visit, building a helipad, painting rooms, and ordering JFK's favorite dishes. It was going to be a new Camelot, built not with chivalry, but favors. But Camelot had rules, and Bobby Kennedy, appointed Attorney General, had his own crusade: destroy the Mafia. It didn't matter that Frank had helped JFK win the crown. The mob was now the enemy, and so was Sinatra by association. It was the ultimate betrayal. Giancana felt used, furious. He'd risked exposure, made promises, broken laws, all for a candidate who turned his brother loose on the very system that helped get him elected. Sinatra, caught in the middle, tried to hold it together. He made calls, sent gifts, begged for meetings. But the door to the White House had been slammed shut. Then came the public humiliation. Sinatra had invited JFK to stay at his Palm Springs compound during a West Coast visit. The place was refurbished to perfection. Staff prepared the rooms. Security rehearsed the landings. Then, cancellation. Last minute. The president wouldn't be staying with Frank. He'd be staying with Bing Crosby, a Republican. Why? Because FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover warned the president that Sinatra's ties to Giancana were too dangerous. Sinatra smashed his phone, shattered a bar of crystal glass, and reportedly took a sledgehammer to the helipad himself. Years later, Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law and a member of the Rat Pack, admitted Sinatra never forgave him. Lawford had been the one to deliver the news. Frank was now radioactive, no longer just a singer with mob friends, but a liability, a walking scandal waiting to happen. The FBI intensified their surveillance. Microphones in dressing rooms, wires at hotels, men following him from Vegas to New York. And the mob? They weren't happy either. Giancana had gambled on Kennedy. Now he was being hunted like a dog. Sinatra the Bridge had collapsed. Rumors flew that Giancana considered silencing him permanently. One story, likely myth but disturbingly persistent, claimed that Frank's vocal cords were targeted, that an enforcer had been told to shut him up for good. The hit was called off at the last minute when Giancana heard Sinatra's recording of That's Life. Moved by nostalgia or sentiment, he let the voice live. But Kennedy wasn't as lucky. On November 22, 1963, the world changed with 2 bullets in Dallas. Sinatra reportedly wept. His friend, his president, gone. But behind the tears there were whispers. Mob retribution, CIA operation, a betrayal of promises. No theory was too wild, and somehow Sinatra's name kept floating in the fog. A year later, still reeling, Sinatra pulled The Manchurian Candidate from theaters. In the film, he played a brainwashed veteran involved in a political assassination. The eerie parallels to Kennedy's death were too painful. Too risky. Some say the Mafia worried the film revealed too much. Others say Sinatra simply couldn't bear the imagery anymore. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Frank had flown too close to the sun. The same charm that once opened doors to gangsters and presidents now left him burned. But he wasn't done yet. The downfall, redemption, and later years. The 1960s ended not with a bang for Frank Sinatra, but with a long, echoing silence. The man once adored by Bobby Soxers and feared by senators had become a subject of FBI files, backroom whispers, and betrayed alliances. And yet, in true Sinatra fashion, he refused to go quietly. Following JFK's assassination, Sinatra's relationships, professional and personal, fractured. The Rat Pack was disbanding. Dean Martin pulled away. Peter Lawford was exiled. Sammy Davis Jr., facing racial criticism for marrying a white woman, drifted into political exile. The aura of indestructibility was slipping. And Frank? He felt it. He saw it in his record sales, and worse, in the headlines. The 1963 Cal Neva Lodge scandal was the nail in the casino coffin. Sinatra had once been part owner of the glamorous Lake Tahoe resort, half Hollywood hideaway, half Mafia den. When it emerged that Sam Giancana had been spotted on the premises, where mobsters weren't legally allowed, Frank was forced to give up his Nevada gambling license. He sold his shares. The FBI closed in, and the once proud owner of Las Vegas Glitz was now on the outside looking in. To some, this was karma. To others, it was merely mob protocol. If you get too hot, you get iced out. Sinatra was no longer useful. Too many microphones in the walls. Too many agents in the shadows. Giancana stopped taking his calls. Luciana was long dead. Bugsy Siegel was buried under bullets. And Frank's name was now just another black mark in the Bureau's 1,275-page file on him. Then came 1968, and with it, the near end of the road. Sinatra announced he was retiring from music, burnout, beat down, and bitter. The legend had grown tired of chasing his past. But the past, especially in Frank's case, never stopped chasing him. That same year, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, and the world was once again reminded how deep the knife could go when politics, power, and backdoor deals collided. Sinatra stayed silent. He offered no campaign support, no tributes. Some said he feared retribution. Others believed he knew too much. But Frank Sinatra didn't vanish. He regrouped. The 1970s marked the beginning of the comeback. A new generation of listeners didn't care about Mafia rumors. They wanted to hear My Way. Sinatra returned to the stage, re-signed with Capitol, and launched Old Blue Eyes Is Back in 1973. His voice wasn't as sharp, his phrasing not as nimble, but his presence, undeniable. He reclaimed Vegas, headlined sold-out shows, shook hands with presidents again, but this time, Republicans. In an ironic twist of fate, Sinatra, the lifelong Democrat who helped elect JFK, endorsed Ronald Reagan, a man whose Hollywood days had overlapped with Frank's, but who now embodied the law and order politics Sinatra once mocked. But even in these years of redemption, the ghost never left. In 1981, Sinatra applied to renew his Nevada gambling license. The Nevada Gaming Control Board summoned him, not to perform but to testify. Under oath, he had to deny all allegations: mob involvement, business with Giancana, illegal favors. Frank responded with calm defiance. He claimed he was just an entertainer, that he took photos with everyone, that he was no criminal. He was backed by Ava Gardner, Gregory Peck, Bob Hope, and even Kirk Douglas, who vouched for his character. And it worked. He got his license. But the public still wondered, was the Mafia done with Sinatra, or just done using him? Some claimed he still took quiet dinners with low-level bosses in New Jersey. Others insisted that his 1960s connections had shielded him for life, earning him a pass most never got. Then came a bizarre twist. Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped in December 1963, just weeks after JFK's death. 3 amateur criminals took the boy and demanded a ransom of $240,000. Frank paid. The kidnappers were caught. But speculation swirled. Was this a message? A warning from the mob? Or just an opportunistic crime that tragically intersected with Frank's tumultuous life? Sinatra never answered. He never had to. That was the magic and menace of his legacy. In his final years, Frank settled into something resembling peace. He continued touring until 1995, performed for global dignitaries, received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but the shadow never quite faded. When he died on May 14, 1998, at the age of 82, the world mourned a voice, a legend, a symbol of American glamour. But for some, especially those in smoky back rooms or hushed intelligence circles, his death marked the final page in a story too dangerous to write. 7 months after his passing, the FBI declassified Sinatra's files. Over 1,200 pages of notes, surveillance, wiretaps, and reports. No criminal charges, but no exoneration either. Just a mosaic of fear, fame, and familiarity with America's most powerful underground forces. To this day, historians, mob experts, and old Hollywood insiders debate the truth. Did Frank Sinatra merely perform for mobsters, or did he belong to them? Frank Sinatra's voice defined an era, but it was his secrets that defined his legend. Tied to presidents, crooks, and kings of showbiz and crime, he lived on a stage where truth and myth danced together. He may be gone, but the whispers still echo, and maybe they always will.